This house on Primrose Lane was once my sanctuary. I can still remember the day the realtor handed me the keys, a cool weight of brass and promise in my palm. I walked in as a full-fledged owner for the first time, my late husband Arthur's smiling photograph tucked under my arm. Julian was only 13 then, and he looked at me with such admiration, as if I'd single-handedly built the place brick by brick. "Is this really our house, Mum?" he asked, running his palm along the smooth oak of the staircase banister. "Yes, darling," I replied, a swell of pride and relief washing over me. "It's our house now." I didn't know then that 35 years later, that same sun would stand by and watch as I was made to feel like an unwelcome guest, a piece of antique furniture that no longer fit the decor. My name is Isadora Finch. I'm 75 years old, and for most of my life, I worked as a senior archivist at the Port Blossom University Library. It wasn't a glamorous profession, but it was one of quiet dignity that taught me two invaluable things: the enduring power of history and the quiet art of patience. After Arthur passed away from a sudden heart attack, leaving me with a young son and a half-paid mortgage, I swore to myself that I would never be financially vulnerable again. Arthur had been a meticulous accountant, a man who believed in slow, steady growth. He had taught me the language of the stock market, of blue-chip shares and diversified portfolios. "It's not about getting rich quick, Isadora," he used to say, his gentle voice a comforting hum. "It's about building a fortress, one stone at a time." So, I built my fortress. I put a little away each month. I continued the investment strategy he'd taught me, studying the financial pages with the same diligence I applied to cataloging medieval manuscripts. By 45, the mortgage was a memory. By 50, my portfolio was robust. By 60, I could have retired comfortably, but I continued working. I loved the smell of old paper, the hushed reverence of the reading rooms, the companionship of my colleagues. No one knew the extent of my savings. Not my friends, not my colleagues, not even Julian. Especially not Julian. After the raw grief of losing his father, I decided that money was a private, quiet comfort, a foundation that needed no announcement. The house on Primrose Lane was my haven. 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, and a garden that was my canvas. I cultivated heirloom roses, Peace, Mr. Lincoln, Queen Elizabeth, and their fragrance would drift through the open windows on summer evenings. On weekends, I'd have tea with my neighbor and dear friend, Beatrice, our conversation a gentle rhythm against the backdrop of birdsong and the distant chime of the town clock. Life was a calm, flowing river. Then Julian met Mila. Mila was a whirlwind of modern efficiency and bright, brittle smiles that never quite reached her cool blue eyes. She worked in marketing for a tech startup, a world of buzzwords and relentless forward momentum that felt utterly alien to me. They dated for a year, a swift, intense courtship that culminated in a sleek, minimalist wedding. "Mom, Mila and I have been thinking," Julian began one Sunday afternoon, about 5 years ago, as the newlyweds sat in my sun-drenched living room. "You're here all alone in this big house, and we're paying a fortune for that tiny rental downtown. We could move in with you." Mila placed her hand on mine, her nails a perfect, glossy crimson. "You wouldn't have to manage everything yourself, Isadora. And we could finally save up for a proper down payment on our own place." A small, quiet alarm bell chimed in the back of my mind, but I silenced it. He was my son. The house was indeed large, and the thought of having their youthful energy around felt like a promise of renewed vitality. "Only temporarily," I stipulated, my voice gentle. "Until you save up for your own home." They moved in 2 weeks later. For the first few months, it was lovely. Julian fixed the dripping tap in the kitchen I'd been meaning to call a plumber for. Mila, surprisingly, would sometimes cook dinner, her meals stylish and healthy. We'd watch films together in the evenings. It was almost the picture of a happy, multi-generational family. The change began so gradually, so subtly, that I barely registered it at first. It was a slow erosion, like a tide pulling sand from a beloved shore. First, Mila rearranged the living room furniture. "It's more Scandi, Mom," Julian explained, using one of her favorite words. "It creates a better flow." My comfortable, Chin's armchair was replaced by a sleek, low-slung sofa that was murder on my back. Then, my photographs began to disappear from the mantelpiece, Julian's school pictures, a treasured shot of Arthur and me on our honeymoon, replaced by Mila's abstract art prints. My beloved roses in the front garden were next. I came home one afternoon to find a landscaping crew digging them up. "Mom, no offense, but the roses were a bit dated," Julian said, avoiding my gaze. "Mila found this amazing landscape designer who specializes in xeriscaping. It's all native grasses. Very low maintenance." He didn't seem to notice the way the color drained from my face, the way my hands clenched at my sides. As time went on, I felt increasingly like a tenant in my own home. Julian and Mila took over the entire second floor, including my spacious master bedroom. I was asked to move into the small downstairs room we'd always used as a study. "It's so much more practical for you, Mum," Julian said, his voice laced with a concern that felt rehearsed. "You won't have to climb the stairs. It's safer at your age." I didn't argue. It was, in a way, more convenient, though my knees were perfectly fine. Then came the unspoken rules. The television was not to be played above a certain volume. The washing machine was not to be used after 9 p.m. I was to give them at least 2 days' notice if I planned to have Beatrice over for tea. My house, my sanctuary, was no longer mine. One afternoon, I came home from a library fundraiser to find Mila in my new, smaller room, sifting through the drawers of my writing desk. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Oh, Isadora." She didn't even have the grace to look embarrassed. "I was just looking for a stamp. I knew you always kept them in here." I knew she was lying. The stamps were in a ceramic pot on the kitchen counter, and she knew it. But I said nothing. I just closed the door to my room more firmly after she left. From that day on, I started locking it when I went out. Mila noticed. "Mom, don't you trust us?" Julian asked that evening, his tone wounded. "It's not about trust, Julian. It's about privacy," I replied, my eyes fixed on the book in my lap, afraid he would see the deep, weary sadness in them. "But we're family," he insisted. "We shouldn't have secrets from each other." I nearly laughed. If only he knew the secret I carried, tucked away in brokerage accounts and trust funds, a fortress built of patience and Arthur's quiet wisdom. The months bled into years. My space in the house shrank. My collection of classic novels was moved from the living room shelves to boxes in the garage to make way for Mila's business manuals and minimalist art books. My Royal Doulton tea set, which I'd collected piece by piece over decades, was packed away. "It's just too fussy, Isadora," Mila had declared. "It doesn't match the new aesthetic." Even my reliable old Volvo, parked in the driveway, became a point of contention. "Mom, it's an eyesore," Julian said one day. "Why don't you just sell it? You barely drive." "I drive to the market and to my appointments," I argued. "You could take a taxi. Or I could drive you," he offered, as if it were a grand favor. I just shook my head. My car was my last bastion of true independence. I found myself becoming a silent observer at my own dinner table. Julian and Mila would discuss their demanding jobs, their weekend plans, their friends. It was as if I were invisible, a ghost at the feast. "Isadora, could you pass the salt?" Mila would say, never calling me Mum, not even Mrs. Finch. For my 74th birthday, they went away for a weekend to a spa resort with friends, leaving a card and a box of supermarket chocolates on the hall table. "Sorry, Mum. This was planned ages ago. We'll celebrate when we get back." We never did. I remember sitting alone in my little room that night, looking at the generic greeting card and thinking about how vast the distance between my son and me had become. "Isadora, why do you stand for it?" Beatrice demanded during one of our clandestine tea parties, held at her house now. "It's your home." "He's my son," I replied, the words a familiar, threadbare excuse. "A son who treats you like a relic he doesn't have the heart to throw out," she snorted. I fell silent, but her words, sharp and true, lodged themselves in my heart. The final, irrevocable turning point came last spring. I was in the back garden, tending to the small patch of lavender they had allowed me to keep, when I heard Julian and Mila talking through the open kitchen window. They didn't know I was there. "How much longer do you think she'll hold on?" Mila's voice was casual, as if discussing the weather. Don't talk like that, Mila, Julian chided, but his voice lacked any real conviction. I'm just being practical, darling. Your mother isn't getting any younger. This house is paid off. When it passes to you, we could sell it and finally buy that loft downtown. Mila, stop. Julian sounded annoyed, but not outraged. Not protective. Or, she continued, her voice dropping conspiratorially, we could suggest she moves into a care facility. It's not like she can live alone forever. It's not safe at her age. Think about it, Julian. Sunset Meadows is lovely. I froze, the trowel falling from my hand. My blood ran cold. They were discussing my future, my life, as if I were a line item on a budget, a problem to be solved. Maybe you're right, Julian said after a long, heavy pause. I'll talk to her. Sometime next week. The week that followed was agonizing. I tried to act normal, but a cold, hard knot of resentment had formed in my stomach. Julian was unusually solicitous, asking about my health with a thoughtful frown, as if assessing me for signs of decay. Mila, on the other hand, was less subtle. She began leaving brochures for assisted living facilities on the coffee table. You know, Isadora, she said one evening at dinner, my colleague's aunt just moved into Sunset Meadows. She says it's wonderful. 24-hour care, social activities, a community of her peers. Really? I kept my voice light. How old is she? 82, Mila replied. 7 years older than I am, I said calmly. And I imagine she has health issues? Well, yes. Arthritis. A little. Confusion. How interesting, I murmured, sipping my tea. I have neither. My last checkup showed I'm in excellent health for my age. Julian coughed, not meeting my eyes. Mom, no one is saying you need to move right now. We're just thinking about the future. My future? Or yours? I asked directly. A heavy silence fell over the table. We are worried about you, Julian finally said, his voice clipped. This house is too big for you. But I'm not alone, I countered. You live here. Yes, but we can't look after you forever. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. What looking after was he talking about? I took care of myself completely. I still volunteered at the library twice a week, managed my own affairs, and drove myself wherever I needed to go. Isadora, Mila interjected with that saccharine smile, you have to be realistic. Maintaining a property this size takes energy. And money. The roof needs work. The heating bills are astronomical. And whose fault is that? I looked her straight in the eye. Who insisted on replacing a perfectly good boiler with that complicated new system? Who tore up my garden, which I maintained beautifully, for a patch of gravel and grass that now looks neglected because your low-maintenance plan requires a professional crew you haven't hired in months? Mila paled. We were trying to make it more comfortable. For yourselves, I added quietly. Not for me. Julian slammed his fork down. That's it. Mother, this is unbearable. We try to help, and you act like a spoiled child. His words struck me with the force of a physical blow. My son, the boy I had sacrificed so much for, standing there, defending this woman who was methodically erasing me from my own life. I'm tired of you picking on Mila, he raged on. She does her best to make you comfortable, and all you do is criticize. I rose silently from the table and went to my room, locking the door behind me. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake, replaying the years in my mind, searching for the moment my caring son had transformed into this cold, selfish stranger. The next morning, I came down to find only Mila in the kitchen. Isadora, we need to talk, she began, forgoing any pretense. I know this is difficult, but moving is the best decision for everyone. For everyone? Or for you and Julian? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. Her composure finally cracked. Let's be honest, she snapped, her eyes glittering. You're 75. You can't live alone, and we want to start our own life. Without obligations. You mean without a burden, I said, the words a bitter taste in my mouth. I own this house, Mila. I paid for it. I maintained it for decades. And now you can't, she retorted. Your pension barely covers the bills. Julian told me. I almost smiled. Julian had no idea. He saw the modest pension from the library and assumed that was my entire world. My finances are my own affair, I said. And I am perfectly capable of maintaining my home. But you aren't, she cried, her voice rising. The leaky roof. The outdated plumbing. The roof and plumbing need repairs, yes, I agreed. But instead of offering to help with that, you're suggesting I abandon my home. Because the repairs cost money you don't have, she shouted. Julian can't carry you and the house. I took a deep, steadying breath. Let me be very clear, Mila. This house is mine. Not Julian's. Not yours. Mine. And I will decide what happens to it. Her face twisted in a mask of fury. You selfish old woman. Julian is your only son. This house will be his one day anyway. Perhaps, I said. But that day has not yet come. That evening, the final conversation took place. Julian came home early, his face grim. He and Mila sat opposite me in the living room, a united front. Mom, Julian began, we've decided. It's time for a change. You can't live here anymore. I see, I said, my voice unnervingly calm. It's the best thing, he continued, gaining momentum. We've looked into it. You could move to a lovely, smaller flat, or we can help you get a place at Sunset Meadows. So, you want me to leave my home? It wasn't a question. Don't be so dramatic, he grumbled. We need this house to start our family. A family? I looked at him, a profound sadness settling over me. A family isn't just a husband and wife, Julian. It includes parents, grandparents. Or have you written me out of that picture entirely? He looked away, and in that gesture, I had my answer. All right, I said, straightening my back. A strange sense of peace washed over me. I'll leave. Mila couldn't hide a flicker of triumphant surprise. You will? Yes, I nodded. But on one condition. What? They asked in unison. The house remains mine. You can live here, but I am not selling it or signing it over. It remains my property. Then what's the point? Mila sputtered. We can't renovate a house that isn't ours. Then don't, I shrugged. Live in it as it is. Or move out and find a rental. The choice is yours. Mom, that's not fair. Julian cried. We've been taking care of you. This time I did laugh. A short, bitter sound. Taking care of me? When was the last time you asked about my day and truly listened to the answer, Julian? You have systematically pushed me into a corner of my own home, and now you have the audacity to talk about care. He paled, then his face hardened. If you're going to be like that, we have no choice. Either you sign the house over to me and move out peacefully, or... He trailed off. Or what? I raised an eyebrow. You'll throw your mother out on the street. Not the street, Mila interjected smoothly. To a care facility. Where you belong. I looked from her venomous face to my son's conflicted one. Is that your final word, Julian? He held my gaze, shame warring with determination in his eyes. Yes, mother. It's for the best. Very well, I nodded. Give me 1 week to pack. But, where will you go? He asked, a flicker of genuine concern finally showing. That, I said, turning to leave the room, is no longer any of your concern. And just so we're clear, the house is not being signed over. You may live here for now, but it will be sold. Sold? Mila shrieked. You can't. I paused at the door. Oh, I can, I said, looking back at them one last time. It's mine. And it always will be. The next week was a blur of quiet, focused activity. Julian and Mila kept their distance, clearly believing I would break down and capitulate. They underestimated me. They always had. I didn't just pack boxes. I met with my financial advisor, Mr. Sterling, a kind, shrewd man I'd worked with for years. I consulted my solicitor to update my will. And I viewed apartments. Not small, sad flats on the edge of town, but elegant, modern residences in the heart of the city. I chose one in a new building called the Azure Spire, a gleaming tower with panoramic views of the sea. On the day of my departure, I called a taxi and brought my suitcases to the front door. Julian and Mila watched in stunned silence. Mom, you're actually leaving? Julian asked as the taxi pulled up. I am, I said, pulling on my coat. I'll leave the keys on the hall table. But where are you going? He asked again, his voice strained. To my new home. A care facility? Mila blurted out. You arranged it all so quickly. I turned and gave her a smile, a genuine one this time, full of a light she had never seen in me. No, darling. An apartment. At the Azure Spire. Julian stared at me, his mouth agape. The Azure Spire? But that's the most expensive residential building in Port Blossom. How can you possibly afford it? I finished for him. Quite easily, Julian. I've always been able to afford a great deal more than you imagined. What do you mean? He stammered. I mean, I said, buttoning my coat, that your poor old mother is not, in fact, poor at all. The fortress Arthur taught me to build is quite substantial, and I have no intention of sharing it with ungrateful children. Mila's face was a mask of disbelief. Julian looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. But you were a librarian. I was, I said with a small shrug. And I was also a very good investor. It's amazing what one can accumulate with discipline and patience. The taxi driver honked gently. I picked up my handbag. Mom, wait, Julian said, stepping in front of me. Let's talk about this. If you have money, maybe we can work something out. The house, our future. I looked at my son, and for the first time, I felt not just sadness, but a kind of pity for him. Even now, his first thought was of personal gain. It's too late for that, Julian. You made your choice. Now I've made mine. The utility bills will be in your name starting next month. Don't forget to pay them. I walked around him and out the door, into the bright morning air. I didn't look back. As I settled into the back of the taxi, a feeling of profound, exhilarating freedom washed over me. Where to, ma'am? The driver asked. The Azure Spire, I said, looking straight ahead. And on the way, could we please stop at the Porsche dealership on the waterfront? My apartment at the Azure Spire was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping vista of the harbor, the sea stretching out to meet the sky. The first few days, I did little more than sit in a comfortable armchair, sipping tea and watching the shifting colors of the water, reveling in the silence and the space. It was my territory, my rules, my life. Isadora, this is magnificent. Beatrice exclaimed when she visited, her eyes wide. To think you could have had this all along, while you were living in that little room with them. One can get used to living small, I said, pouring her tea into my Royal Doulton cups, which now sat proudly in a glass-fronted cabinet. But it's much more pleasant to live large. We laughed, and she urged me to finally take the coastal driving trip through Scotland we had dreamed of for decades. Why not? I agreed. Now that I'm free, I can do anything I want. You should start with something truly special, Bea said, her eyes twinkling. Something you've always wanted but never dared to get. The thought took root. The next morning, I made an appointment at the Porsche dealership. I wore an elegant cream-colored trouser suit and the pearl necklace Arthur had given me for our 20th anniversary. I felt not like a 75-year-old widow, but like a woman on the cusp of a great adventure. A polite young salesman named Daniel showed me their models, subtly trying to steer me towards a practical SUV. I'm interested in the sports models, I interrupted gently. The 911, for example. He blinked, surprised, but led me to a car in the center of the showroom. It was a masterpiece of engineering and design, its lines sleek and predatory. But the color was a generic silver. Do you have anything brighter? I asked. He hesitated. We do have one in sapphire blue. It's a very bold choice. He led me to it, and my breath caught in my throat. It was the color of a deep ocean on a summer's day, a vibrant, unapologetic blue that shimmered under the showroom lights. It was perfect. I'll take it, I said, not a hint of doubt in my voice. Perhaps you'd like to discuss our financing options, Daniel began. That won't be necessary, I said, opening my handbag and taking out my checkbook. I'll be paying in full. The look on his face was a reward in itself. The following morning, I drove my new car home. The engine purred with a low, satisfying growl, a sound of power and potential. As I drove along the coastal road, the sea breeze in my hair, I felt decades younger, lighter. I was no longer Isadora Finch, the quiet archivist, the grieving widow, the burdensome mother. I was just Isadora. And for the first time in a very long time, that was more than enough. A year has passed since that day. I sold the house on Primrose Lane to a young family. I hope their laughter fills the halls. Julian and Mila bought a small townhouse in a new development. Our relationship is tentative, a fragile bridge being rebuilt one conversation at a time. We meet for lunch occasionally, just the two of us. He is more respectful now, more thoughtful. He is learning to see me not as his mother, but as a person. It is a start. My life, however, has blossomed in ways I never imagined. I joined a painting class and discovered a passion for watercolor. My new friends from the class, a retired doctor, a history professor, a witty playwright, have become a second family. With Theodore, a kind gentleman who owns the antique shop down the road, I've discovered a shared love for jazz and long walks along the beach. Beatrice and I took that trip to Scotland. We drove through the Highlands in my sapphire blue Porsche, the wild, beautiful landscape unfolding before us, a testament to the fact that it is never, ever too late to start a new chapter. Sometimes, in the evenings, I sit on my balcony, watching the lights of the boats in the harbor. I think of the house on Primrose Lane, a place of both sanctuary and sorrow. I don't feel bitterness, only a quiet gratitude for the lessons it taught me. It taught me that self-respect is not selfish, that setting boundaries is an act of self-preservation, and that the most important fortress one can build is not made of money or property, but of the unshakable belief in one's own worth. And as I look out at the endless, shimmering sea, I know my adventure is just beginning.